of a nationality or culture. In modern political usage, the term ethnic, the term ethnic is generally used as the designation of a social unity based upon common and separate language or historical living in a different area, occupation and mood of life, culture and social traditions, customs and folklore. It is also used for the social classes, racial or national minority groups, and also for the distinguishing cultural and social groups in the society. There are differences with regard to emphases. Some would include a religious denomination under the rubric. Some would identify a race as an ethnic group, whereas other the latter is a smaller subdivision of race or so on. There are some of whom as in the ethnic group is composed of what have been called primor- primordial primordial affinities of attachments. For them, it is the identity made of what person is born with a acquires at birth. But for some ethnic groups, though centrally concerned with the cultural matters, symbols and values and with issues of self-definition, are not given entities but are social and political constructions. Paul Brass, for instance, he says that any group of people dissimilar from other people in terms of objective cultural criteria and containing within its membership, either in principle or in practice, the element for a complete division for labor and for reproduction from an ethnic category. The objective cultural marks may be a language or a dialect, distinct dress or diet of the costume, religion or race. ସର୍ବପ୍ରଥମେ ଏଥନିକ୍ ର ଅର୍ଥ ଆମେ କହିଲେ ପ୍ରିମିଟିଭ୍ ଗ୍ରୁପ ବା ପ୍ରିମିଟିଭ୍ କାଷ୍ଟକୁ ଆମେ ବୁଝେଇଥାଉ। ସିଧା କହିବାକୁ ଗଲେ ସିଡିଲ୍ ଟ୍ରାଇବ୍ସ ମାନଙ୍କୁ ବା ଜନଜାତି ମାନଙ୍କୁ ଆମେ ହିଁ ଏଟା ବୁଝିଥାଉ। କାହିଁକି ନା ସେମାନେ ହଉଛନ୍ତି ସମାଜର ପ୍ରଥମ ଆଦିବାସୀ ବା ପ୍ରଥମ ଅଧିବାସୀ। ତ ସେଥିପାଇଁ ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ ଆମେ ଆଦିମ ଅଧିବାସୀ ବା ପ୍ରଥମ ମାନବ ସମାଜର ପ୍ରଥମ ଲୋକ ବୋଲି ତାକୁ ଆମେ ଗ୍ରହଣ କରିଛୁ। ଦିନ ଥିଲା ଆମେ ସମସ୍ତେ ଟ୍ରାଇବାଲ ଥିଲୁ। वी आर ऑल आर द ट्राइबल। ଆମେ ସମସ୍ତେ ଟ୍ରାଇବାଲ, କିନ୍ତୁ ସମୟ ଚକ୍ରରେ ପଡ଼ି ଆମେ ଟ୍ରାଇବାଲ ରୁ ଆମେ ସିଭିଲ ପିପୁଲ ବା ସିଭିଲ ସୋସାଇଟି ଗଠନ କରିକି ସୋସିଆଲ ପିପୁଲ ହେଇଯାଇଛୁ। କିନ୍ତୁ those persons are now still now they have in the forest or a mountain area or a remote area, they have lived in according to their custom, tradition and culture. They are the real primitive groups are called tribals. जो एथनिसिटी कथा आम कहे एथनिसिटा ग्रीक शब्द एथनोस रु आसी अछि जार अर्थ होची जे हेथेन नेशन और पीपुल नॉट कन्वर्ट टू द क्रिश्चियनिटी, जार अर्थ होची एक निर्दिष्ट भूखंड रे रहिथिबा बा बसवास करुथिबा एक स्वतंत्र धरणर लोक को आमे एथनिक बोली कहिथाउ। जदि प्रिमिटिव कहबा विशेषकर आफ्रिकान कंट्री रे सर्वप्रथमे ए प्रिमिटिव ग्रुप मैंने बसवास करते। आफ्टर देन दे आर स्प्रेड टू ऑल ओवर द वर्ल्ड। धीरे धीरे से अलग देश को स्प्रेड करते। तेणु आदिम अधिवासी माने जो आम इतिहास विषय पढ़ु थाउ जे सेमाने कहीं आदिम अधिवासी बोली कही था से एक स्मॉल ग्रुप ऑफ पीपुल लिविंग देयर अकॉर्डिंग टू देयर ट्रेडिशन, तांकर परंपरा संस्कृति को लेकिन से गोटे ग्रुप करथांती। है से ग्रुप जड़े ग्रुप मुखिया रही था। ତାଙ୍କର ନିର୍ଦ୍ଦିଷ୍ଟ ଧର୍ମ ଅଛି। କୋଉ ଧର୍ମ? ବେସିକାଲି ସେମାନେ ଦେ ୱାର୍ସିପ୍ ଟୁ ଦ ନେଚର। ସେମାନେ ପ୍ରକୃତିକୁ ଭଲ ପାଆନ୍ତି, ପ୍ରକୃତିକୁ ଭଗବାନ ବୋଲି ଭାବନ୍ତି। ପାହାଡ଼, ପର୍ବତ, ଗଛ, ପାଣି, ଅଗ୍ନି ସେମାନଙ୍କ ଦେବତା ବୋଲି ସେମାନେ ବିଶ୍ୱାସ କରନ୍ତି। ସେମାନଙ୍କର ନିର୍ଦ୍ଦିଷ୍ଟ ଭାଷା ମଧ୍ୟ ଅଛି। ସେମାନେ ନିର୍ଦ୍ଦିଷ୍ଟ ନୃତ୍ୟ ଶୈଳୀ ତାଙ୍କ ପାଖରେ ଅଛି। ତେଣୁ ଏଇ ଯେଉଁ ସ୍ପେସିଫିକ୍ ଗୋଟେ ଡିଫରେଣ୍ଟ ଗ୍ରୁପ ଅଛନ୍ତି ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ ଆମେ ସେଡ୍ୟୁଲ୍ ଟ୍ରାଇବ୍ ବୋଲି କହିଥାଉ, ବା ଆମେ ଏଥନିକ୍ ଗ୍ରୁପର ପ୍ରି କଲଚରାଲ, ପ୍ରି ସୋସିଆଲ ଆଣ୍ଡ ପ୍ରି ପଲିଟିକାଲ ଲାଇଫରେ ଏକ ଥିବା ଗ୍ରୁପକୁ ଆମେ ବୁଝାଇଥାଉ। ତେଣୁ ସିଧା କହିବାକୁ ଗଲେ ପ୍ରିମିଟିଭ୍ ଅର୍ଥ ହେଲା ଆଦିମ ସମାଜର ବାସବାସ କରୁଥିବା ସେହି ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କୁ ଯେଉଁମାନେ ଆମେ ଟ୍ରାଇବାଲ୍ସ ବୋଲି କହିଥାଉ। ମନେ ରଖିବା ଉଚିତ ଆମେ ବି ଦିନେ ସେ ଟ୍ରାଇବାଲ୍ସ ଥିଲୁ। ପରବର୍ତ୍ତୀ ସଭ୍ୟରେ ଆମେ ଆମର ରୂପ ପରିବର୍ତ୍ତନ କରି ବା ଆମର କଲର ଚେଞ୍ଜ ହେଇଯାଇଛି। ଆମେ ପ୍ରଥମେ ସେ ବ୍ଲାକ୍ ଥିଲୁ, ପରବର୍ତ୍ତୀ ଆମର ଯୋଉ ଜେନେରେଟ୍ ହେଇଯାଇଛି ଆମର କଲର, ଆମେ ସବୁ ଅଦର କଲର୍ସ ହେଇଯାଇଛୁ। ସୋ ବେସିକାଲି ଦ ବ୍ଲାକ୍ ପିପୁଲ୍ସ ଆର୍ tribal peoples. Black peoples are tribal peoples. First, ethnicity. From the above, that becomes clear that in the present day context, those groups which in given social context consciously choose to emphasize their most meaningful primary extra-familial identity on the basis of religious, racial, culture, linguistic, national characteristics, or the combination of any of them are referred to as the ethnic group. ଏଥନିକ୍ ଗ୍ରୁପ କହିଲେ ସେମାନଙ୍କ ସ୍ୱତନ୍ତ୍ର ରଙ୍ଗ ଅଛି, ସ୍ୱତନ୍ତ୍ର ଫିଗର ଗୋଟେ ଚେହେରା ଅଛି, ସ୍ୱତନ୍ତ୍ର କଲଚରାଲ ସାଂସ୍କୃତିକ ସଂସ୍କୃତି ଅଛି, ଲିଙ୍ଗୁଇଷ୍ଟିକ ଭାଷା ସ୍ୱତନ୍ତ୍ର ଅଛି ଏବଂ ଫିଜିକାଲ ଫିଚର୍ସ ବଡିର ବୈଶିଷ୍ଟ୍ୟ ମଧ୍ୟ ସମ୍ପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣ ରୂପେ ଅଲଗା ଦେଖିବାକୁ ମିଳିଥାଏ। ଏହି ପ୍ରକାର ଗ୍ରୁପକୁ ଆମେ ଏଥନିକ୍ ଗ୍ରୁପ ବୋଲି କହିଥାଉ। ଦ ନମ୍ବର ଅଫ ସଚ୍ ଏଥନିକ୍ ଗ୍ରୁପ୍ସ sometimes refer to the people or nationalities in an enormous the world over. ସାରା ବିଶ୍ୱରେ এই ପ୍ରିମିଟିଭ୍ ଗ୍ରୁପ୍ସ ବା ଟ୍ରାଇବାଲ ଜନଜାତିର ଲୋକମାନେ ଦେଖିବାକୁ ମିଳିଥାନ୍ତି। ଭାରତରେ ମଧ୍ୟ ଅଛନ୍ତି, ଆଫ୍ରିକାରେ ଅଛନ୍ତି, ଅଷ୍ଟ୍ରେଲିଆରେ ମଧ୍ୟ ଅଛନ୍ତି। ତେଣୁ ଅଧିକାଂଶ ମହାଦେଶରେ ଟ୍ରାଇବାଲ ଲୋକ ଦେଖିବାକୁ ମିଳିଥାନ୍ତି। ଆମେରିକାରେ ମଧ୍ୟ ଟ୍ରାଇବାଲ ପିପୁଲ ଅଛନ୍ତି ଯାହାକୁ ରେଡ୍ ଇଣ୍ଡିଆନ ବୋଲି କୁହାଯାଇଥାଏ। ହେଲା, ଭାରତରେ ଯେଉଁ ଟ୍ରାଇବାଲ ପିପୁଲ ଅଛନ୍ତି ଦେ ଲୁକ୍ସ ଲାଇକ୍ ଦ ବ୍ଲାକ୍, ତାଙ୍କୁ ଆମେ ଆଦିବାସୀ ବୋଲି କହିଥାଉ। ଆଫ୍ରିକା ଯେଉଁ ଲୋକମାନେ ଅଛନ୍ତି ସେମାନେ ଦେଖିବାକୁ ଭେରି ବ୍ଲାକ୍, ତାଙ୍କୁ କାରାବିଆନ୍ ବୋଲି କୁହାଯାଇଥାଏ। So in different countries have different names in the tribal peoples. Sometimes refer to the peoples of nationalities is enormous the world over. How many are there is not easy to determine because there are very few systematic treaties dealing with these matters. Stabenthal suggested that the educated estimates based mainly on anthropological and linguistic criteria would place the number of nations, peoples, or ethnic groups at the around 5 to 8,000, the real figure popularly being closer to the latter. Our concern them is not with the number of such groups, but with the fact that these groups live in the specific number of states into which the present world is divided. Accordingly, with the entire land surface now divided among states, nearly all the states contain more than one ethnic or cultural group within their borders and are thus heterogeneous or plural societies. The situation is particularly significant in numerous new states that have achieved independence since the Second World War, the post-colonial states in Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean. In most of the multi-ethnic states the world over, In recent years, there has been a resurgence of ethnic and cultural demand, and group consciousness, which is generally referred to as the rise of ethnicity. By the ethnicity, it is generally meant that conditions where contain members of a society in a given social context choose to emphasize as their most meaningful basis of primary extra-familiar identities certain assumed culture, national or Semitic traits. It implies that for a group associated around a common history and culture, their identities and their nature of their projects appear to the distinguishing feature differentiating this group from the larger social formation in which the group of consists. ଆମେ ଯଦି ସେମାନଙ୍କର ରେସ୍ ବା ବର୍ଣ୍ଣ ହିସାବରେ ଦେଖିବୁ ପ୍ରତ୍ୟେକ ଦେଶରେ ଆଦିବାସୀ ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କର ବର୍ଣ୍ଣ ସମ୍ପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣ ଭିନ୍ନ ଦେଖିବାକୁ ମିଳିଥାଏ। ଯୋଉଟାକୁ ମୁଁ କହିଲି ଆମେରିକାନ ହେଲେ ରେଡ୍ ଇଣ୍ଡିଆନ୍ସ ବା ରେଡ୍ କଲର, ଇଣ୍ଡିଆରେ ହେଲେ ଲାଇଟ୍ ବ୍ଲାକ୍ କଲର, ବଟ୍ ଆଫ୍ରିକାନ ମାନେ ହେଲେ କାରାବିଆନ୍ ପିପୁଲ, ଦେୟାର ରେସ୍ ଇଜ୍ ଭେରି ବ୍ଲାକ୍ ହେଲା। ତେଣୁ ସେଇ ଦୃଷ୍ଟିରୁ ଡିଫରେଣ୍ଟ କଲର ଦୃଷ୍ଟିରୁ ମଧ୍ୟ ତାଙ୍କର ଆଇଡେଣ୍ଟିଟି ବା ଏଥନିସିଟି ପରିଚୟ ଦେଖିବାକୁ ମିଳିଥାଏ। ଇନ୍ ପଲିଟିକ୍ସ ଭାରତରେ 64 types of tribal people. 64 types of tribal peoples are living. In Odisha also 62 types of tribals living in Odisha only. In political term, ethnicity is a sense of ethnic identity which has been defined by DeVos as consisting of the subjective symbolic or embellishment used by a group of people of any aspect of a culture in order to differentiate themselves from other groups, or the Paul Brass suggested in order to create a internal cohesion and differentiate themselves from other groups. Now, what is the characteristics of ethnic group? ସେମାନଙ୍କର ଲକ୍ଷଣ ଆଉ ବୈଶିଷ୍ଟ୍ୟ ବିଷୟରେ ମୁଁ କିଛି କହୁଛି ଯେ ଏଥନିକ୍ ଗ୍ରୁପ ମାନଙ୍କ ତାଙ୍କର ଲକ୍ଷଣ ଆଉ ବୈଶିଷ୍ଟ୍ୟ କ'ଣ। As seen above, some of the observers, experts, and even in the general, there is no agreed meaning of the term ethnic. However, various definitions do refer to some characteristics. A review of the literature by Paul Brass suggested that there are three ways of defining ethnic group. How many ways? There are three ways to define the ethnic groups. In terms of objective attributes with reference to the subjective feelings, and the last one is in relation to the behavior. Again, I will say that it is in terms of objective attributes. Secondly, with reference to the subjective feelings. Third, in relation to the behavior. An objective definition assumes that though no specific attribute is invariably associated with all ethnic categories, there must be some distinguishing culture feature and clearly separate of one group of people from another. The features may be language, territory, region, color, diet, dress, or any them. ଆମେ ତାଙ୍କର ଲକ୍ଷଣ ବା ବୈଶିଷ୍ଟ୍ୟ ଦେଖିଲେ ଯଦି ଏଇଟା କ୍ଲିୟର କହିପାରିବା, ସେମାନଙ୍କର ଭାଷା ଅଲଗା, ଟେରିଟୋରି ଏରିଆ ଭୂଖଣ୍ଡ ଆୟତନ ଅଲଗା, ରିଲିଜନ ଧର୍ମ, ସେମାନେ ସପୋଜ ମନେକର ହିନ୍ଦୁ କଥା, ହିନ୍ଦୁ ହେଲେ ବି ସେମାନେ ଆମେ ଯୋଉ ଦେବାଦେବୀ ପୂଜା କରୁ ସେମାନେ ତାହାଙ୍କୁ ପୂଜା କରନ୍ତି ନାହିଁ, ସେମାନଙ୍କର ଅଲଗା ଦେବାଦେବୀ ଥାନ୍ତି, କିନ୍ତୁ ତାଙ୍କ ରିଲିଜନ ମଧ୍ୟ ଅଲଗା। Color Brahmin people or social people to compare with the other tribal people, there are so many difference between them with the color. ତେଣୁ କଲର ଦେଖିଲେ ତାଙ୍କ ଡିଫରେନ୍ସ କଲର ମଧ୍ୟ ଦେଖିବାକୁ ମିଳିଥାଏ। ଡାଏଟ ଖାଦ୍ୟ, ଆମେ ଯାହା ଖାଉଛୁ ସେମାନେ ତାହା ଖାଆନ୍ତି ନାହିଁ, ସେମାନେ ବଣରୁ ମିଳୁଥିବା ଖାଦ୍ୟ ଖାଇଥାନ୍ତି ଫଳ ମୂଳ ଗଛ ପତ୍ର ଡାଳ କନ୍ଦମୂଳ ତ ସେମାନଙ୍କର ପ୍ରଧାନ ଖାଦ୍ୟ ଅଛି ତା ସହିତ ଜଙ୍ଗଲ ଶିକାର କରିକି ମାଂସ ମାଛ ତାଙ୍କର ମୁଖ୍ୟ ଖାଦ୍ୟ ହୋଇଥାଏ ସେମାନେ କମ ପ୍ରଡକ୍ସନ କରନ୍ତି ବେଶୀ ଶିକାର ପ୍ରେ କରନ୍ତି ଆଉ କଲେକ୍ସନ କରନ୍ତି ପ୍ଲାଣ୍ଟ ମାନଙ୍କରୁ ଏଇଭଳିଆ ତାଙ୍କର ବହୁତ କ୍ୟାରେକ୍ଟର ଦେଖିବାକୁ ମିଳିଥାଏ an objective definition is problematic in that it is usually extremely difficult to determine the boundaries of ethnic categories in the manner they suggest. A subjective definition carries within the inherent difficulty of answering the basic questions of how a group of people initially arrives at a subjective self-consciousness. Behavioral definitions are really form of objective definition since they assume that there are specific concerns in which the ethnic groups behave or do. Definitions merely suggest that there are cultural differences between ethnic groups and the critical distinctions reveal themselves only in the interaction with the other groups, but the but the existence of a explicit code of behavior and interaction is rather more characteristic, more pervasive, and more evident in simple rather than the complex, in which people may establish their separateness with reference to specific attributes without adopting an entity distinctive code of behavior that are the difference or characteristic of the primitive groups. Now, another point, ethnicity and the state. Ethnicity and the state. How the ethnic or primitive group make the state, how they involve in the state. We have seen above that the overwhelming majority of societies today are multi-technical, multi-technique and multicultural. Many of these are too also in trouble. Some have proven on even to create or sustain a strong sense of solidarity across ethnical life. The member of one national group are indifferent to the right and interest of the members of your group. This is increased by international migration caused by economic factors. Yet, there has been a tendency in most states to ignore or sidetrack the ethnic issue, whereas most states are multi-ethnic. Few acknowledge this fact, and even fewer have made constitutional or other legal provisions for the multiple ethnicity. Even democratic states have argued that by the providing equal rights and the opportunity to all the citizens, they have respected cultural specified in the particular ethnicity. The primitive group ମାନେ ବା ବେସିକାଲି ଟ୍ରାଇବାଲ ପିପୁଲ ମାନେ ଯଦି ଆନ୍ସିଏଣ୍ଟ ପିରିୟଡ଼ ଆମେ ତାଙ୍କୁ ଲକ୍ଷ୍ୟ କରିବା ସେମାନେ ମୋନାର୍କି ବା ରାଜତନ୍ତ୍ର ସମୟରେ ରାଜାଙ୍କ ଅଧୀନରେ ଥିଲାବେଳେ ସେମାନଙ୍କ ଉପରେ ରାଜାଙ୍କ କୌଣସି ଦୃଷ୍ଟି ପଡୁନଥିଲା କାରଣ ସେମାନେ ରିମୋଟ ଏରିଆରେ ବସବାସ କରୁଥିଲେ ରାଜା ସେମାନଙ୍କ ପାଇଁ କୌଣସି ଡେଭଲପମେଣ୍ଟ ୱାର୍କ କିଛି କରିପାରୁନଥିଲେ ବା କରୁନଥିଲେ ପୁଣି ଯେତେବେଳେ ଆସିଲା କଲୋନିଆଲ ପିରିୟଡ଼ ବା ଉପନିବେଶ ସମୟ ଆସିଲା ବ୍ରିଟିଶ ମାନେ ଡଚ୍ ଫ୍ରେଞ୍ଚ ଏମାନେ ସବୁ ଆସିଲେ କଲୋନି ପ୍ରତିଷ୍ଠା କଲେ ତ ସେମାନଙ୍କର ନଜର ପଡ଼ିଲା ଫରେଷ୍ଟ ଉପରେ ଫରେଷ୍ଟର ଟିମ୍ବର ବା ଉଡ୍ ଗୁଡ଼ାକ ସେମାନେ କଲେକ୍ସନ କଲେ ଯାହାଦ୍ୱାରା କି ସେମାନଙ୍କର ଯୋଉ ଜଙ୍ଗଲ ମା ଧୀରେ ଧୀରେ ନଷ୍ଟ ହେଇଗଲା ବ୍ରିଟିଶ ମାନେ ତାଙ୍କ ଜଙ୍ଗଲକୁ ନଷ୍ଟ କରିଦେଲେ ଆଉ ଜଙ୍ଗଲକୁ ଯିବା ପାଇଁ ମଧ୍ୟ ବ୍ୟାରିୟର ବା ଅନୁମତି ଦେଲେ ନାହିଁ ତେଣୁ ସେମାନଙ୍କର ଜଳ ଜମି ଜଙ୍ଗଲ ସବୁଦିନ ପାଇଁ ହାତ ଛଡ଼ା ହେଇଗଲା आउ सेमाने एई उपनिवेश विरोधी बा ब्रिटिश मानक विरोधी होई आंदोलन करबाकू लागिथिले। तो सेमाने धीरे धीरे जंगल ठारू दूरेबाकू लागिले काहेकि ना ब्रिटिश सरकार जंगल को जीवा पई मना करथिला एवं जंगल रो कलेक्शन करिया पई जो लघुजात द्रव्य ता भी मना करथिला। सो सेमाने हाउ टू दे सर्वाइव तेणु तांकर जो डेली लाइवलीहुड बा डेली रोज रोटी कोड आनिबे तेणु बाध्य कि सेमाने आस्ते आस्ते ग्रामांचल को गति कले और धीरे धीरे सहरांचल को गति कले एवं सहर रे निजको जने लेबरर हिसाब रे सेमाने कार्यकारी कले एवं सहर रहिला परे तांकर निजस्व भाषा निजस्व कल्चर डांस फूड डाएट ये सब सेमाने भूलिबा को बाध्य हेले काहेकि ना सहर रे तांकर ग्रुप नांती एकिटिया रहउचंती। तो सेमाने धीरे धीरे ट्राइबल ग्रुप रु बाहर जाई सोशल ग्रुप से एडजस्ट हेले। तो अदर लैंग्वेज मध्य शिखिले एवं धीरे धीरे पाठ पढ़ा बाध्य हेले। तापर आसिला जेते डेमोक्रेटिक पीरियड आसिला ब्रिटिश माने चली गले पृथ्वी पृष्ठरु कॉलोनियल बाद सरीगला एवं गणतंत्र आसिला। एई गणतंत्र बाद रे जो प्रथम नियम अछि ऑल आर इक्वल जाति धर्म वर्ण लिंग जन्मस्थान निर्विशेष रे आमे सबसे समान। ये जो इक्वालिटी राइट टू इक्वालिटी राइट टू फ्रीडम ये जो शब्द गुड़ाक से प्रযোज्य है आउ सेमाने अन्य मान सहित समकक्ष हो पारे है। तेणु वर्तमान समाज जो डेमोक्रेसी शासन प्रचलित होती तो ए कौन जाति भेद ना रेस वर्ण भेद ना जोटा कि आफ्रिकार इंग्लैंड माने कला गुरा भेदभाव सृष्टि करते कोलाप्स हो जाए देखा मिलूना समस्ते समान है। पाठ पढ़े खाइबारे बसबारे बुलबारे ऑल आर इक्वाल है। संविधान अधिकार देती ये अधिकार को जो भायोलेट कर संविधान पनिशमेंट कर। तो से जो ट्राइबल बा प्रिमिटिव ग्रुप माने अदर ग्रुप सहित समकक्ष हवा को लगी समान हवा को लगी। देखो नाउ ए डेज इन इंडिया इज ए ट्राइबल वुमेन आपण माने के विश्वास करथिले जो ट्राइबल माने घंच जंगल पहाड़ भितर रोते जो ट्राइबल माने निजको प्राकृतिक बा प्रकृति सहित हजाई देते से आज सहर मुखी है देशर मुख्य भाव राज्य शासन मुख्य भाव सीट अलंकृत करेंगे केवल स्वप्न आमे भाई ना से भाई समय आसला देशर सर्वोच्च पदवी मिलला भारतर राष्ट्रपति भाव ट्राइबल वुमेन द्रौपदी मुर्मू को ये राजगादी मिली से उड़ीसा रे मध्य जने जनजाति युवक को उड़ीसार शीर्ष पदवी प्रदान करा जायछि काहेकि ना ये हूँ डेमोक्रेटिक प्रोसेस रे ऑल आर इक्वल देयर इज नो डिस्क्रिमिनेशन बिटवीन रेस कास्ट रिलीजन जेंडर एंड द प्लेस ऑफ द बर्थ। ओके now I'm going to explain another point multiculturalism बहुत सांस्कृतिकवाद बा multiculturalism deter multiculturalism over different form of cultural pluralism right from the beginning celebrated by some and rejected by others. Multiculturalism has been controversial because of its real perceived compatibility with the traditional nation of national unity. As a discourse, multiculturalism can broadly be understood as the recognition of a coexistence of a plurality of a culture with the nation. The basic spirit behind any immigrant should be free of maintain some of their old customs regarding to food, dress, religion, and so associated with each other to maintain these practices. Liberal multiculturalism as a theory, as a theory of ethnic and cultural identities and their links to political institutions. The first, contrary to official adopt such as multiculturalism policy at the national level was Canada in 1971, but it has since been adopted in many other countries like Australia, New Zealand, Sweden, Britain, Netherlands, and elsewhere. It reflected a concern to make the liberal democracies of the West more sensitive to the existence of a cultural pluralism within the boundaries of the nation state, which had been the till then been considered to be a culturally homogeneous extensions of liberal principles to those sections of the society which, which had been disadvantaged and thereby excluded from the polity. It is a significant movement in the extension of a liberal principle and can be considered as further development after the civil rights movements of the 1950s and 1960s in the US. In the US, in countries like Canada, Australia, there has multiculturalism consists of four broad meanings. First is it is the descriptive term which suggested that the country is composed of numerous cultural groups, thus making it a polyethnic society. Secondly, it is it is an ideology based. It is an ideology based on the perceptions about the way the society should be organized. This implies an acceptance that the migrants will want to maintain their language and cultural traditions, and that it will be continue across several generations. Thirdly, multiculturalism suggests as a principle for social policies which assumes government responsibility for the removing structural advantages and implementing policies which ensure equality and access. Fourthly, it means a set of special institutions which are the designed to implement the principle of participation, access, and equity. The sort of a policy is based on the premise that the support of their cultural identity of a diverse ethnic group within a accommodate by exchange and the interaction among them will facilitate the integration to society as a whole. ବହୁ ସଂସ୍କୃତିବାଦ ବେସିକାଲି ଆମେରିକା, କାନାଡା, ଅଷ୍ଟ୍ରେଲିଆରେ ଆଉ ଇଭେନ୍ ଏଠି ଇଣ୍ଡିଆ, ଆଫ୍ରିକାରେ ମଧ୍ୟ ବହୁ ସଂସ୍କୃତିବାଦ ସେମାନଙ୍କ ମଧ୍ୟ ଦେଖିବାକୁ ମିଳିଥାଏ। ବହୁ ସଂସ୍କୃତି କହିଲେ କ'ଣ ତ ମନେକର ଭାରତୀୟ ସଂସ୍କୃତି ସହିତ ଅଦର କଣ୍ଟ୍ରିର ସଂସ୍କୃତି ବା ଆମେ ଯଦି କହିବା ହିନ୍ଦୁ ସଂସ୍କୃତି ସହିତ ଇସଲାମ ସଂସ୍କୃତି ବା ଖ୍ରୀଷ୍ଟିଆନ ସଂସ୍କୃତିର ମିଳନ ଠିକ୍ ସେଭଳି ଟ୍ରାଇବାଲ ସେମାନେ ଟ୍ରାଇବାଲ ମାନେ ସେମାନେ ଭେଜାଲ ହେଇଗଲେଣି because they have no own tradition culture have own culture they have the mix of the other cultures ତେଣୁ ସେମାନେ ଅଦର ଅନ୍ୟମାନଙ୍କ ସଂସ୍ପର୍ଶରେ ଆସି ଅନ୍ୟ ରିଲିଜନ ହଉ ଅନ୍ୟ ଗ୍ରୁପ୍ସ ହଉ କମ୍ୟୁନିଟିଜ ହଉ ସଂସ୍ପର୍ଶରେ ଆସି ତାଙ୍କର ସଂସ୍କୃତିର ମିଳନ ଘଟିଛି ଏବଂ ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ସେମାନେ ଯେଉଁ ମଲ୍ଟି ଏଥନିକ ବା ବହୁ ବହୁ ସଂସ୍କୃତିବାଦ ବହୁ ଭାଷାବାଦ ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ ମଧ୍ୟ ଦେଖିବାକୁ ମିଳିଛି। ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ଯେଉଁ ଟ୍ରାଇବାଲ ସମାଜରେ ଯେ ବ୍ୟାକୱାର୍ଡ କାଷ୍ଟ ଆଉ ଆସ୍ତେ ଆସ୍ତେ କମି କମି ଯାଉଛନ୍ତି କାହିଁକି ନା ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ ସବୁ ପ୍ରକାର ସୁବିଧା ସୁଯୋଗ ପ୍ରଦାନ କରିବା ଦ୍ୱାରା ସେମାନେ ଇକ୍ୱାଲ ଟୁ ଦ ଅଦର କ୍ୟାଟାଗୋରି। Now power sharing. Power sharing already talking about the power sharing. Draupadi Murmu or Mohan Maji is a belongs to the group of tribals. Nowadays they are king and queen in Odisha and India. One aspect of the ethnic politics, particularly in case of ethnic group concentral in the certain territories, has been that minorities have typically responded to majority nations building to maintain or rebuild their own societal culture by engaging in their own competing nation building. For that, they raise the question of self-administration, self-determination, by which they generally mean power to share their own destiny. Self-determination, by which they generally mean power to shape their own destiny. The preposition that every people should freely determine its own political status and freely pursue in economic, social, and cultural development has been understood in many ways. It may be internal and external, and components range from the simple self-government in one extreme of the fulfill of self-government at the other. Many observations, many observe that the suggested and many states accept that the middle way to keep ethnic group satisfied within the spheres of successionism is to make the share power to popular mechanism, power power sharing or federalism and the constitutionalism. ତେଣୁ ଫେଡେରାଲିଜିମ୍ ବା ସଂଘୀୟବାଦରେ ଗଣତନ୍ତ୍ର କ୍ଷେତ୍ରରେ ପାୱାର ଡିଷ୍ଟ୍ରିବ୍ୟୁସନ କ୍ଷମତା ବିକେନ୍ଦ୍ରୀକରଣ କରାଯାଇଛି। ପ୍ରତ୍ୟେକ ପ୍ରତ୍ୟେକ ଅର୍ଗାନାଇଜେସନକୁ ବା ପ୍ରତ୍ୟେକ ଇନଷ୍ଟିଚ୍ୟୁସନକୁ କ୍ଷମତା ବିତରଣ ମାଧ୍ୟମରେ ଯେଉଁ ପ୍ରିମିଟିଭ୍ ଗ୍ରୁପ ଅଛନ୍ତି ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ ମଧ୍ୟ କ୍ଷମତା ବଣ୍ଟନ କରାଯାଇଛି। ଯଦି ଆମେ ଏ ଷ୍ଟଡି ଅଫ୍ କେସ୍ ଓଡ଼ିଶା ଇଣ୍ଡିଆ କଥା କହିବା, ଓଡ଼ିଶାରେ ଆମେ ଦେଖୁଛୁ ट्राइबल पीपुल मानक पॉलिटिकल रिप्रेजेंटेटिव हिसाब लाइक दैट एमएलए एमपी सरपंच काउंसिलर कॉर्पोरेटर फॉर दिस सीट दे आर रिजर्व सीट विल हैव फॉर दे से स्वतंत्र स्थान आम रिजर्व रखुचु कहीं पावर द रूल होची पावर शेयर टू द प्रिमिटिव ग्रुप्स। नाउ summary of the topics. Summary of the topics. Modern societies are increasingly confronted with the minority group determined recognition of their identity and accommodation of their cultural differences. The group concerned with the identity are generally known as ethnic. It is contemporary political usage. The term ethnic and minorities are generally used interchangeably to describe groups which share a common language, race, religion, or national origin other than that of the dominant group in a state. In that context, the overwhelming majority of societies today are multi-ethnic and multicultural. Chapter 16 is already over. That unity was ethnicity, politics, and the state. Already over in my class. Now I am going to explain another unity or topic: politics of a community identity. Politics of a community identity. निजर परिचय पाई निजर स्थिति बजाय रखिबा पाई हमको कौन करबा को पड़े। डेफिनेशन एंड स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ कम्युनिटी आइडेंटिटी। कम्युनिटी व्हाट इज कम्युनिटी? कम्युनिटी कहले कौन बुझुछ? कम्युनिटी कहले the notion of a community identity is a very complex phenomenon as the Thomas Bender writes. According to the Thomas Bender, a community involves in a limited number of people in a somewhat restricted social space or network held together by shared understanding and a sense of obligations. Relationships are close, often intimate, and usually face to face. Individuals are bound together by affective or emotional ties rather than by the perception of individual self-interest. There is a wellness in a community. One is a member. One is a member. Then structure of a community identity. Structure of a community identity. କମ୍ୟୁନିଟି କହିଲେ ଗୋଟିଏ ଗୋଷ୍ଠୀକୁ ବୁଝାଇଥାଏ ଯେଉଁ ଗୋଷ୍ଠୀ କି ଏକ ସ୍ୱତନ୍ତ୍ର ଭାଷା, ସ୍ୱତନ୍ତ୍ର ପରମ୍ପରା, ସ୍ୱତନ୍ତ୍ର ସଂସ୍କୃତିକୁ ନେଇ ସେମାନେ ପରିଚାଳିତ ହୋଇଥାନ୍ତି, ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ କମ୍ୟୁନିଟି ବୋଲି କୁହାଯାଇଥାଏ। ନେକ୍ସଟ, structure of a community identity. Community construct their identity around the object factors such as territorial location, a shared historical memory, shared traditions, common rituals and practices, and common language, and a real to the received common ancestry. କମ୍ୟୁନିଟି ଗୋଷ୍ଠୀ ସେଇମାନଙ୍କୁ କହିବା ଯୋଉ ଭୂଖଣ୍ଡରେ ସେମାନେ ରହୁଛନ୍ତି ବା ଯୋଉ ଅଞ୍ଚଳରେ ସେମାନେ ରହୁଛନ୍ତି ସେମାନେ ପରସ୍ପର ମଧ୍ୟ ତାଙ୍କର ଭାବ ବିନିମୟ କରୁଛନ୍ତି। ସେଇଆଡ଼େ ହିଷ୍ଟୋରିକାଲ ମେମୋରି ତାଙ୍କର ଐତିହାସିକ ଚିନ୍ତାଧାରାକୁ ପରସ୍ପର ମଧ୍ୟରେ ତାଙ୍କର ଭାବ ବିନିମୟ କରୁଛନ୍ତି। ସେୟାର ଟ୍ରାଡିସନ୍ସ ତାଙ୍କର ପରମ୍ପରାକୁ ମଧ୍ୟ ବିନିମୟ କରୁଛନ୍ତି। କମନ ରିଚୁଆଲ୍ସ ସମସ୍ତଙ୍କ ପାଇଁ ଗୋଟିଏ ପୂଜା ପାର୍ବଣ ପ୍ରଚଳିତ ହେଉଛି, ଯେମିତି ଆମ ପାଇଁ ଦୁର୍ଗା ପୂଜା, ଦୀପାବଳି, ହୋଲି, ତ ସେମାନଙ୍କ ପାଇଁ କମନ ରିଚୁଆଲ୍ସ ପ୍ରାକ୍ଟିସେସ୍ ଆଣ୍ଡ କମନ ଲାଙ୍ଗୁଏଜ ସେମାନେ ସବୁ ବ୍ୟବହାର କରୁଥିବାରୁ ସେମାନେ ଗୋଟେ କମ୍ୟୁନିଟି ବୋଲି କହିବା। However, the structure of the feeling may be a Neeraj Chanduke argues. According to the Neeraj Chanduke, she argues unexpressed, unexpressed subterranean, unrealized or unrestricted, comparing on the formal and informal structure of identity of a community. Neera Chandurke argued that unexpressed, subterranean, unrealized, or unrestrictual, commenting on the formal and informal structure of identity of a community. According to Joshua A. Fishman argued that this is a matter of being, doing, and knowing. Matter of being, doing, and knowing. Being, doing, and knowing. First of all, as a matter of being, there should be a formal existence of a body of people who share the intergeneration links to their common ancestors and should evolve around the above given the subjective factors. Secondly, as a matter of doing, identity of a community demands authentic activities and behavior from its member, for which a community is known as the external sphere. In other words, community identity demand in members of perform their intra-community obligations and roles thoroughly. The issue of knowing refers to the identity consciousness which means the members of a community keep a understanding as who they are where they came from and what they should do with the identifiable situation. In brief, we may say that they know the difference between the insiders and the outsiders. Now, features of identity of a community. Features of identity of a community. କମ୍ୟୁନିଟି ମାନଙ୍କର ପରିଚୟ ପାଇଁ କଣ କଣ ସବୁ ତାର ବୈଶିଷ୍ଟ୍ୟ ବା ଲକ୍ଷଣ ଅଛି ଆମେ ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ଡିସ୍କସନ କରିବା। Point 1, some of the community identities. Some of the community identities are natural and cannot be changed. One becomes a member of such communities by having born therein. These kinds of identities are based on the caste, race, ethnic, religion, or tribal sector. କେତେ ଗୁଡ଼ିଏ ଗୋଷ୍ଠୀ ଅଛନ୍ତି ତାଙ୍କର ଯେଉଁ ପ୍ରାଚୀନ ବା ପୁରାତନ ଭାଷା, ପୁରାତନ ସଂସ୍କୃତି, ପରମ୍ପରା, ବର୍ଣ୍ଣ, ଧର୍ମ, ରିଚୁଆଲ ଏସବୁ ଗୁଡ଼ାକୁ ସେମାନେ ଆଜି ପର୍ଯ୍ୟନ୍ତ ଧରି ରଖିଛନ୍ତି। Second point is, it may be possible that the community members have multiple identities, but the importance of any one depends on the time and the situation. Thus, these are situational in nature. ପରିସ୍ଥିତି ପରିସ୍ଥିତି ପାଗକୂଳ ଅନୁଯାୟୀ ଅନୁକୂଳ ପରିସ୍ଥିତି ବା ପ୍ରତିକୂଳ ପରିସ୍ଥିତି ଅନୁଯାୟୀ ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ ଖାପ ଖୁଆଇ ଚଳିବାକୁ ପଡ଼ିବ। ତେଣୁ ସେମାନେ ନିଜର ସମସ୍ତ ଯେଉଁ କଲଚରାଲ ଟ୍ରାଡିସନ ରିଚୁଆଲ ପରିସ୍ଥିତି ଅନୁଯାୟୀ ସେମାନେ କାର୍ଯ୍ୟ କରିଥାନ୍ତି। Number 3, identities are the product of collective consciousness contact among the members of a community. Aloofness and isolation from other communities, thus there are relational. ତ କ'ଣ ଅଛି ନା ସମ୍ପର୍କୀୟ ଦୃଷ୍ଟିରୁ ବା କୁଳ ବଂଶ ଦୃଷ୍ଟିରୁ ତ ସେମାନେ ସେଇ ଜାଗା, ସେଇ ଧର୍ମ, ସେଇ ପ୍ରଥା, ସେଇ ଭାଷାକୁ ପ୍ରଚଳନ କରି ଆସୁଛନ୍ତି। They are the community features of the identity of a community. Next point, methods and strategies. Methods and strategies adopted by the community. Methods and strategies adopted by the communities. ଏଇ ଯେଉଁ ଗୋଷ୍ଠୀ ମାନଙ୍କ ପାଇଁ କେଉଁ କେଉଁ ପଦ୍ଧତି ବା ଶୈଳୀ ଗୁଡ଼ିକ ଗ୍ରହଣ କରାଯାଇଛି ଆମେ ଆଲୋଚନା କରିବା। ସର୍ବପ୍ରଥମେ ଆମେ କଲଚରାଲ ରେଜିଷ୍ଟାନ୍ସ ବା ସାଂସ୍କୃତିକ ପ୍ରତିବନ୍ଧକ ଯେ ତାଙ୍କ ପାଇଁ ଦେଖାଯାଇଛି। କାହିଁକି ନା ସେମାନେ ଆଉ ଜଙ୍ଗଲରେ ନାହାନ୍ତି କି ପାହାଡ଼ରେ ନାହାନ୍ତି, ଜଙ୍ଗଲରେ ଶିଳ୍ପ ହେଇଯାଇଛି, ପାହାଡ଼ରେ ବା ପାହାଡ଼ ପାଖରେ ଡ୍ୟାମ ସୃଷ୍ଟି ହେଇଛି। ତେଣୁ ତାଙ୍କର ସମସ୍ତ ପ୍ରାକୃତିକ ସମ୍ପଦ ନଷ୍ଟ କରି ଆମେ ଆଜି ସହର ବନେଇ ଦେଇଥିବାରୁ ତାଙ୍କର ଜୀବନଶୈଳୀରେ ବହୁତ ପରିବର୍ତ୍ତନ ଘଟିଛି। ପ୍ରଥମେ ପଢ଼ିବା କଲଚରାଲ ରେଜିଷ୍ଟାନ୍ସ। All the communities struggling against the majority and the biased states have used cultural resistance commonly. In the cultural resistance, communities have been using all sorts of signs and symbols of their identity. The communities have adopted the strategy of cultural resistance in both private as well as public spheres. This includes democratic and undemocratic types of the action to get the massive support. In the private sphere, the community members in the family and the friend circles primarily carry out resistance. In this case of the specific and differentiating characteristics of the community, such as the language, history, and culture, are disestimated to be the literature, and the ignorant members of the community through formal as well as informal channels. But in the public sphere, these are resist through their symbolic actions, interference of actions, LIT actions, etc., etc. First, what is the symbolic actions? Now, these type of actions are performed by small groups or even by single individuals. The main The main objective of such actions is to break the control over the opposite regimes over the public space. The actions are performed in the streets and addressed to all the witness. Number two, interference of the action. The community members execute the actions during the course of public events. The aim of such actions is to challenge the regime. It is the one of the dispute. The symbols which such as the homogeneity has been achieved. This action is implied in the high degree of risky situations because on this occasion, high security arrangements are the cell of the prevent of short disturbances. देखो ट्राइबल पीपुल माने जेतो तांकर फेस्टिवल ऑब्जर्वेशन करंती सेमाने बेसिकली ड्रग्स निशा पी थांती वन टाइप ऑफ नेचुरल ड्रग्स दे ओनली अडक्टेड हला जाको आमे मोहुली कहि थाउ हांडिया कहि थाउ बा एनी टाइप्स ऑफ ड्रग्स और ड्रिंक्स दे ओनली यूज टू तो सेतले सेमाने याकु पी साइला पोरे जो ट्रेडिशनली वेपन्स धनु तीर वर्षा ये जो मारणात्मक जो अस्त्र शस्त्र धरी से माने डेन्स करिथांती बा परफॉर्मेंस करिथांती तो एटा पब्लिक प्लेस रे एटा एक्सेप्टेबल नुहे पण तांको रिचुअल कम्युनिटी तांको प्लेस रे से माने एटा को परफॉर्म करि परिबे बट इन सिटी पीपल कैन नॉट बी एक्सेप्टेड बिकॉज़ सिटी पीपल्स आर वेरी पीसफुल कोएक्सिस्ट so they cannot use their weapons in the city ତେଣୁ ସେମାନେ जो सहर रोचंती ये जो अस्त्र शस्त्र से माने व्यवहार करि परिबे नाही बा व्यवहार करिया पे अनुमति नाही नेक्स्ट पॉइंट armed struggle in most of the cases where the state failed to satisfy the communities through the constitutional arrangements the communities report the sparing of a separate state of its own, provoking the state of military crackdown to check the separatist divisions in a community. In such a scenario, he hawks in the community gain upper hand to taking armed struggle. They choose one out of two following options. Target attacks. Target attacks are the most common option, which is used by the different communities, especially by those who are relatively weak and do not have sufficient resources to fight against the state. Through these communities make state property, territory, and institution target to their attacks. They also target all those symbols which are the species of the state tyranny and of operations. ଯେତେବେଳେ ଯେତେବେଳେ ସେମାନଙ୍କର କଲଚର ବା କମ୍ୟୁନିଟି को ଧ୍ୱଂସ करा जाउची ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ ସପ୍ରେସ ମାନେ ଅତ୍ୟାଚାର करा जाउची ନିର୍ଯାତନା दिया जाउची तो ସେତେବେଳେ ସେମାନେ ବାଧ୍ୟ ହୋଇକି ଯେହେତु ସେମାନେ ଏକ ନିରୀହ ପ୍ରାଣୀ ହେଲା तो ସେମାନେ କଣ କରନ୍ତି ନା ଆଉ କିଛି ବାଟ न पाई तो ସେମାନଙ୍କ ବିରୁଦ୍ଧରେ ସଶସ୍ତ୍ର ବିଦ୍ରୋହ କରିଥାନ୍ତି राजा समय राजा पीरियड रे राजा माने केतेक राजा माने ट्राइबल पीपल को सैनिक भाव में व्यवहार करुଥିଲେ केतेक राजा माने गुड्स गुड़ाक सहर को बही नापी ट्राइबल मान को व्यवहार करुଥିଲେ तो से दृष्टि से बहुत स्ट्रांग ट्राइबल पीपल्स माने बहुत स्ट्रांग बहुत पेशेंस अच्छी है तो से ये सब सत्वे विरुद्ध में कौन अटैक हुए टार्गेट अटैक हुए से माने बाध्य होई तार प्रति आघात देता देखो छोटे एग्जांपल देबी आपण मन ताको एक्सेप्ट करि परंती बा न करि परंती माओवाद एंड नक्सलिज्म माओइज्म एंड नक्सलिज्म से माने प्रथमे ये प्रिमिटिव ग्रुप रो लोक थिले जेतेले सभ्य लोक में तांको पर बारंबार अटैक कले और सरकार कौन पदक्षेप नेले नाही और सरकार तरफ से कौन बेनिफिटेड ग्रांट्स न मिलला से मुह खोल साहस मिलना तेणु से लुचि छुपी आक्रमण करने को लगे और शेष खोला खोली भाव युद्ध घोषणा कले आर्म स्ट्रगल कले जो मैंने आज दिन से नक्सल होती माओवादी होती तो से सामाजिक लोक सहित मिसी ना सामाजिक लोक सहित से केस माली मकदमा करी बंचा सहज नुहे तो से कौन करेंगे तो से निजक बचाई निज परिवार को बचाई निज कम्युनिटी को बचाई शेष बाध्य होई से गरिला युद्ध कर जंगल भितर लुचि छपी पहाड़ भितर लुचि छपी सरकार सैनिक मान आक्रमण करुँच क्षति पहुंचा लोक मान आक्रमण करुँच आज दिन में माओवादी नक्सलवादी जो प्रथम प्राइमरी एम थिला जो प्राथमिक लक्ष्य बा उद्देश्य थिला संपूर्ण बदली जाइए जो लक्ष्य थिला आमे केमिति निजर बंचिबा ताहा नाही बर्तमान सरकार विरुद्ध से लड़िबा को लागुचंती and the target attacks are the most common option within the used by the different communities especially by those who are relatively weak and do not have sufficient resources to fight against the state. Though these communities make the state property, territory, and the institutions target of their attack, they also target all those symbols which are show pieces of the state tyranny and the operations. By this option, the communities also target the public places regardless of all challenges and the characteristics of possible victims, which create a sense of insecurity among the people. Political killing, illegal and open firing of bomb blasts in public places, buses, trains, and aeroplanes are a common form of these target attacks. Recent development in this context have been of restoring to use the human bombs, hijacking, and suicidal attacks. They also show the vulnerability and the incapacity of the state to control the use of violence by other on its own territory. The international media has also raised the issue of community tensions because of these events. Further, it has the post of a state to create clandestine paramilitary forces, private armies, death squads, and other machineries of these safety public property and the institutions. The conclusion or summary of the topic: politics of the community identities. The assertion of a community identities by the reluctant political phenomena have affected the nature, basis and patterns of politics both at the national as well as international plans. At the national level, it has resulted in the unprecedented conflict and violence resulting to death and the destruction of uprooting of people, leading to the internal refugees. It has redemarcated internal borders and affected changes therein. It has led to parallelization of politics, and there is no increasing awareness of a group or community rights. At the international level, it has led to the changes of international borders and the refugees to problem of unprecedented proportions. Domestic jurisdictions of the member of status of the UNO, United Nations organization, which was assiduously made impractical under the Article 2, Clause 7 of the UN Charter, has created to the with UN forces deployed to its 40 nations. ତେଣୁ ଏମାନଙ୍କୁ ସୁରକ୍ଷା ଦେବା ପାଇଁ ଖାଲି ଦେଶର ସରକାର ନୁହେଁ ଆନ୍ତର୍ଜାତିକ ସ୍ତରରେ ଆନ୍ତର୍ଜାତିକ ସରକାର ବା ବିଶ୍ୱ ସରକାର ନାମରେ ପରିଚିତ ୟୁଏନ୍ଓ ମଧ୍ୟ ଅଣ୍ଟା ଭିଡ଼ିଛି। ଦେଶରେ ପ୍ରିମିଟିଭ୍ ଗ୍ରୁପ୍ ମାନଙ୍କର ତାଙ୍କର ଯେଉଁ ଟ୍ରାଡିସନ୍ କଲଚର ଏସବୁକୁ ବଜାୟ ରଖିବା ପାଇଁ आंतर्जातीय स्तर रे समस्त प्रकार व्यवस्था करा जाय. Unit 7 already finished. That chapter was politics of the community identity, already finished. Now I am going to then another subject or another chapter, ethnic movement. Ethnic movement. How do they revolt against the city people or king, zamindar, landlord or industrialist or against the colonialism? जो एथनिक ग्रुप मान रहिले सेमाने काहेकि एमानक विरुद्ध रे विद्रोह करबाकू लागि मु पूर्वरु मध्य ऑलरेडी किछि कहि सारिछि सेमान कारण हला जे जल जमी जंगल सेमानकर मा सेमानकर जीवन सेमानकर लाइफ लाइन जंगल बिना सेमाने बंची पारिबेनी जंगल जमी तांकर प्रकृति दत्त बा भगवान देइथिबा तांकर आश्रयस्थल आउ जल जमी जंगल ये तीनटा को बेस करके सेमानकर जीवन चर्चा चली थाए जदि सेमानक मुहरु को छड़े निया जाए सेमाने भाबन्ते आम माँ को आम ठार छड़े नहीं तेणु सेमाने असह्य हो पड़ती एवं या विरुद्ध रे विद्रोह करने को लागत आम इतिहास रे अनेक ट्राइबल रिवोल्यूशन विषय पढ़ीचे है ओडिशा रे मध्य बहुत खोर्धा डिस्ट्रिक्ट रे भुवनेश्वर कंधमाल कंजपुर ए सब डिस्ट्रिक्ट रे मध्य हेची बहुत तापरे केउंझर मध्य प्रजामेली बा ट्राइबल रिवोल्यूशन देखा मिली कहीं ना दे सेमाने बेसिकली जमींदार जमींदार विरुद्ध बेसी करथिले लोकल किंग्स बा चिफ्टन ऑफ द एरिया एमान विरुद्ध सेमाने बेसी आंदोलन करथिले. The overwhelming majority of societies today are the multi-ethnic and multicultural. Out of some 190 nations, now 194 nation states listed in the official source of 150 such states have 4 or more ethnic groups within their boundaries. पृथ्वी रे वर्तमान 194टा देश मध्य पाखापाखि 150टा देश रे एई एथनिसिटी बा प्रिमिटिव ग्रुप्स लोक माने बसवास करुवा देखिबाकू मिलिछि. Most of these are the increasingly confronted with minority groups demanding recognition of their identity and accommodations of their cultural differences. In a survey of such groups, in a survey, the scholar Ted Gore, he was surveyed in 1993. She singles out 233 minority ethnic groups who are at risk by this he meet group that in the post-World War II period have either taken political action or behalf of their collective discriminations or both. Hence, they are actually or potentially engaged in inter-ethnic conflict. Of these 223 groups, only 27 or about 12% have no record of political organizations, protest, rebellion, or other form of the inter-communal conflict since 1945. तेणु सर्वे अनुजाई तो ट्राइबल कम्युनिटी उपरे किपरि आक्रमण तो कह जीवनी किपरि अत्याचार करा जाउची तार रिपोर्ट से प्रदान करिसंती 1993 रिपोर्ट रे. ethno-nationalism बर्तमान another topic I am going to explain. Ethno-nationalism. In the preceding unit, you have already studied the meaning of ethnicity. The term has some things common with nation. As Walker cannot write Walker cannot ride in its distinct sense of nation refers to a group of people who believe that they are the ancestrally related. It is the group of that can be aroused, stimulated to action by appeals to common ancestors and to blood bond. In this context, nationalism as properly used does not connote loyalty to the state that loyalty in properly termed pluralism. Nationalism cannot loyalty to one's nation, one's extended family. One can one can therefore speak of the English or the Welsh nationalism bit not of the British. One therefore suggests that two loyalties present to different orders of things. Different orders of things. Loyalty to state is the socio-political in nature and is based in the large part of rational self-interest. Loyalty to nation is more initiative than rational, and it is the predicated upon sense of consanguinity, common ancestry. Is no national movement, therefore no movement conducted in the name of the ethnic group which have a sense of being the national group. There are so many factors. There are so many factors responsible for the ethnic movement. First one is the modernization and ethnicity. Modernization and ethnicity. In the operational sense, modernization means the attainment of relativity higher levels of variable such as education, per capita income, urbanization, political participation, industrial employment, media participation, etc. In the operational sense, modernization means the attainment of relatively higher levels of variables such as education, per capita income, urbanization, political participation, industrial employment, media participation, etc. As already started in the early modernizing theory, ethnic identity refer to the traditional obstacles which are supposed to disappear in the course of development. ଆଧୁନିକ ସଭ୍ୟତାରେ ଆଧୁନିକ ସହ ହେବା ଦ୍ୱାରା ଶିକ୍ଷା ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥା ପ୍ରଚଳନ ହେବା ଦ୍ୱାରା ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କର ଇନକମ୍ ବୃଦ୍ଧି ହେବା ଦ୍ୱାରା ସହର ଗଠନ ହେବା ଦ୍ୱାରା ଲୋକମାନେ ରାଜନୀତିରେ ଅଂଶଗ୍ରହଣ କରିବା ଦ୍ୱାରା ବିଭିନ୍ନ ଶିଳ୍ପ ଗୁଡ଼ିକରେ ନିଯୁକ୍ତି ହେବା ଦ୍ୱାରା ମିଡ଼ିଆ ବା ଗଣମାଧ୍ୟମରେ ଭାଗ ବା ଗଣମାଧ୍ୟମ ଚର୍ଚ୍ଚା ହେବା ଦ୍ୱାରା ଯେ ଆଧୁନିକତା ଯୋଗୁଁ ପ୍ରିମିଟିଭ ଗ୍ରୁପ ମାନଙ୍କର ଯେ जो ऑब्स्टाकल प्रिमिटिव ग्रुप जो ऑब्स्टाकल अछि जो तांको जीवन जो बाधा गुड़िक अछि से सब चर्चा करबा द्वारा जे तांकर विद्रोह करबा कारण गुड़ से खोजन तेणु सहर आधुनिक हेबा कारण से माने विद्रोह करि आसुछन। In advanced industrial societies, particularly modernization appears to lead to a personality level vibe, which is also termed by some as alienation and by others simply as rootlessness. In part, alienation may arise from the work situation, the The internationalization of the bureaucratized, bureaucratic, formalized, and urbanized existence within the framework of an excessive centralized state power structure. The modern welfare state. The modern welfare state, in addition to its role as the protector, has taken upon itself in the role of a provider for its citizens. Consequently, there has been increasing state pretension in the civic society as well as its initiatives and resources on the one hand and the rise aspirations of the people from the state of the other. Modernization theory also provides a clue to ethnic assertion in the present day. What is the term of post-material value? What is the term of post-material value? Comparative with the material interest in the post-industrial societies. In this context, some observations link in the revival of ethnicity in the modern era with the advance of science and the decline of religion, with the expansion of the realm of the secular scientific state and the erosion of the religions, colorations of the community. People are confronted with the dilemma of rationality versus community, races versus community. ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ जो ଦ୍ୱନ୍ଦ୍ୱ ସୃଷ୍ଟି କରିଛି ଆଧୁନିକ ସଭ୍ୟତାରେ ଶିଳ୍ପୀକରଣ ଦ୍ୱାରା ଆଦିବାସୀ ମାନଙ୍କର जो प्रथा परंपरा को नष्ट करिछि बा सेमाने आधुनिक सभ्यतार प्रवेश करिसंती पुरातन आदिवासी आउ आधुनिक आदिवासी मध्यरे जो संस्कृति विनिमय एक बाधा सृष्टि करिछि विशेषकर हम सीधा कहबा गले ग्राम्य लोक बा ग्राम्य बसवास करुवा ट्राइबल और सहर में बसवास करुवा ट्राइबल मान मध्यरे एक पार्थक्यर रेखा सृष्टि करिछि बोली आमे वर्तमान जहा देखिबाकू पाउछु आ कोन ना पॉलिटिकल इकोनॉमी देखो वर्तमान सरकार तो ट्राइबल मानक पा जेतु मॉडर्न कर तो समस्त सरकार ग्रांट्स बहुत सहायता करू political economic has both liberal and marxist interest. However, within both these poles there are differences with the rigor of emphasis on difference of the other aspect of economic activity. One aspect of this is the factor of regional inequalities. Several scholars have also pointed about this modernization and industrialization. The post-colonial state. The post-colonial states means उत्तर परवर्ती उपनिवेशवाद समय जो राष्ट्र गुड़िक नूतन करी फ्रीडम पाइले लिबर्टी पाइले स्टेट्स ऑफ द थर्ड वर्ल्ड तांको हमें थर्ड वर्ल्ड बोली कहिताउ से थर्ड वर्ल्ड होउची ए मानकर घर जो थर्ड वर्ल्ड कथा हम कहउतिले से थर्ड वर्ल्ड रे ए माने ही वास करंती the situation is more complex. The economic development paradigm has shown its effectiveness by the early 70s points out of that here the governing elite and modernizing rapidly. But the large masses of the population remained in the state of poverty. In fact, post-colonial capacity development produced large-scale poverty by breaking up pre-capitalist modes of the production and forms of social organization, furthering the market economy and one crop agriculture. Uprooting people have their tradition village, creating urban squirrel and a growing landless proletariat. As the third world as the third world economy became increasingly incorporated into a subordinated to transnational capitalism, internal polarization and the inequalities increase between the social classes and religion. In other words, In other words, the promissory route of continuity and satisfying everybody, they are the become instrumental in scaling the individual wants to changing in the political process, excessive the demands, which is the cannot be accepted the society and satisfied, arising out of the inequalities and the confusion of the aspirations in also a feeling of a relative deprivation, which some observers suggest a significant cause of externalism. Political economy ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ଫ୍ୟାକ୍ଟର କଥା କହିଲେ କି ପଲିଟିକାଲ ଇକୋନୋମି ବା ରାଜନୈତିକ ଅର୍ଥନୀତି ଆଜ୍ ଏ ୱେଲଫେୟାର ଷ୍ଟେଟ୍ ଗୋଟିଏ ଜନମଙ୍ଗଳ ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ରରେ ଜନତାର ମଙ୍ଗଳ କରିବା ସରକାରଙ୍କର ପ୍ରଥମ କାମ। ଯୋଉ ସମ୍ବିଧାନ ତ କହିଛି ଏଠି ଜାତି ଧର୍ମ ବର୍ଣ୍ଣ ଲିଙ୍ଗ କୌଣସି ପ୍ରଭେଦ ନାହିଁ। ସେଇ ଦୃଷ୍ଟିରୁ ସରକାର କୌଣସି ବିନା ପାର୍ଥକ୍ୟରେ ବିନା ଦ୍ୱିଧାରେ ସମସ୍ତଙ୍କୁ ସମାନ ଦୃଷ୍ଟି ଦେଖିଛନ୍ତି। ତ ଯେତେବେଳେ ସମସ୍ତ ସମାନ ଦୃଷ୍ଟି ଦେଖିଛନ୍ତି ଆମେ ଯଦି ସମ୍ବିଧାନ କଥା କହିବା ତ ସାମ୍ବିଧାନିକ ଦୃଷ୍ଟିରେ ଏ ସବୁ କ୍ୟାଟାଗୋରୀ ଭାଗ କରାଯାଏ। କ୍ୟାଟାଗୋରୀ ଅର୍ଥ category these peoples are Brahmin Kshatriyas, OBC category those peoples are in backward in economical backwards, third is middle caste, fourth is tribal tribe। तो ये जो कैटेगरी तक विभक्त करा जाएगी तो लास्ट शेड्यूल ट्राइब एंड शेड्यूल कास्ट ये जो लास्ट ग्रुप है सरकार तरफ सेମାନଙ୍କୁ ସହାୟତା ପ୍ରଦାନ କରାଯାଉଛି। PDS ଚାଉଳ ଗହମ ଏମାନଙ୍କୁ ମଧ୍ୟ ସାମିଲ କରାଯାଇଛି। ଏଜୁକେସନ ଲେଭେଲ ଶିକ୍ଷା ମଧ୍ୟ ଏମାନଙ୍କୁ ବା ଅନେକ କିଛି ସୁବିଧା ସୁଯୋଗ ଦିଆଯାଉଛି। ନିଯୁକ୍ତି କ୍ଷେତ୍ରରେ ମଧ୍ୟ କିଛି ସୁବିଧା ସୁଯୋଗ ଦିଆଯାଉଛି ଯାହାଦ୍ୱାରା କି ସେମାନଙ୍କର ଅର୍ଥନୈତିକ ସମ୍ବଳ ବୃଦ୍ଧି ପାଇବ, ଆର୍ଥିକ ସ୍ତରରେ ସେମାନେ ସ୍ୱାଧୀନ ହେବେ, ଗରିବତା ହଟିବ, ପରିବାର ଡେଭଲପମେଣ୍ଟ ହେବ। ଏହି ଉଦ୍ଦେଶ୍ୟ ନେଇ ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ ସରକାର ବିଭିନ୍ନ ସହାୟତା ପ୍ରଦାନ କରୁଛନ୍ତି। କିନ୍ତୁ ବହୁତ ଥର ଦେଖିବାକୁ ମିଳୁଛି ଡିପ୍ରାଇଭେସନ, ସେମାନେ ବିଭିନ୍ନ ଚାପରେ ରହୁଛନ୍ତି। କାହିଁକି ନା ଆଜି ପର୍ଯ୍ୟନ୍ତ ବି କ୍ଲାସ୍ ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ରରେ ଶ୍ରେଣୀ ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥା ଅଛି, ହାୟର କ୍ଲାସ୍ ଆଣ୍ଡ ଲୋୟର କ୍ଲାସ୍। ଭାରତରେ କାଷ୍ଟ ସିଷ୍ଟମ ଅଛି, ସମ୍ପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣ ମୁକ୍ତ ହୋଇନଥିବାରୁ ସେମାନେ ମଧ୍ୟ ସମାଜରେ ଆପେକ୍ଷିକ ବିଳମ୍ବିତ ହେଉଛନ୍ତି, ଲଜ୍ଜିତ ମଧ୍ୟ ଅନୁଭବ କରୁଛନ୍ତି। ତ ନିଜକୁ ଅନ୍ୟମାନଙ୍କ ସହିତ ସମାନ ବୋଲି ପରିଚୟ ଦେଇପାରୁନାହାନ୍ତି କି ସମକକ୍ଷ ହେଇପାରୁନାହାନ୍ତି। ଏହି ସବୁ କାରଣରୁ ସେମାନେ ସଭ୍ୟ ସମାଜରୁ ଦୂରେଇ ଥିବାର ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥା କରୁଛନ୍ତି ଏବଂ ସହରୀ ଲୋକ ଓ ଆଦିବାସୀ ଲୋକ ମଧ୍ୟ ଗୋଟେ ବିରାଟ ପାର୍ଥକ୍ୟ ଦେଖିବାକୁ ମିଳୁଛି। ତ ଧୀରେ ଧୀରେ ଏହାର ସମାପ୍ତ ଘଟିବ ଆଇନ ମାଧ୍ୟମରେ, ସରକାରଙ୍କ ମାଧ୍ୟମରେ ବା ରାଜନୈତିକ ଯେଉଁ ଅଛନ୍ତି ରିପ୍ରେଜେଣ୍ଟେଟିଭ ମାନଙ୍କ ମଧ୍ୟରେ ତାହା ବିଳମ୍ବ ସମାପ୍ତ ଘଟିବ। Next element is the cultural deprivation. Cultural deprivation. According to this view on the significant in Inducement of ethnicity comes out from the feeling of insecurity among ethnic minorities of their fear from getting lost in the sea of majority. This may be either because of discrimination and oppression by the majority. The state identifying itself with the majority of the homogeneous process arising out of the modernization, leading to the creation of a synthetic state culture. It is not easy to trace prejudice and discriminations empirically. In fact, it is the different even in the define them. Nevertheless, observe to do accept that in the contemporary world, the example of ethnic groups discrimination against the oppressed in varying degrees of to the many ସାମ୍ବିଧାନିକ ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥାରେ ସମସ୍ତଙ୍କୁ ସମାନ ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥା ସମାନ ବୋଲି କୁହାଯାଇଥିଲେ ମଧ୍ୟ ପ୍ରାକ୍ଟିକାଲ କେସରେ ଦେ ଆର୍ ନଟ୍ ଅଲ୍ ଆର୍ ଇକ୍ୱାଲ ସେମାନେ ସମସ୍ତେ ନିଜକୁ ଏକ ବୋଲି ବା ସମାନ ବୋଲି ଭାବୁ ସେମାନେ ବିଭିନ୍ନ କ୍ଷେତ୍ରରେ ନିଜକୁ ନିର୍ଯାତିତ ବା ଅପମାନିତ ବା ଅବହେଳିତ ବୋଲି ବି ଫିଲ୍ କରୁଛନ୍ତି ସେଥିପାଇଁ ସେମାନଙ୍କର କଲଚରାଲ ଡିପ୍ରାଇଭେସନ ହେବାକୁ ଯାଉଛି ସେମାନଙ୍କର ସଂସ୍କୃତି ମୁଖୀ ହେଉଛି okay. I'm trying to next point external factors. Next point external factors. जे बाह्य प्रभाव द्वारा सेमानक लाइफ को प्रभावित करिछि ताहला एक्सटर्नल फैक्टर्स according to some observers that the sprout of ethnic conflict all over the world in recent years was the sustainable external involvement and support. It is pointed out that the use of a large number of small and medium weapons by the ethnic groups, the requiring huge financial requirements for the sustenance, and mass media exposure to their point of view cannot be explained as to the term of the involvement of the external powers. बाह्य क्षेत्र रे सामानंकर गोष्ठी पर बहु प्रभाव पड़ुछि जे बाह्य जगतरु जदि आमे कहिबा बाह्य जगतर अर्थ कॉलोनियल पीरियड छाड़ी दियो आमे आधुनिक कथा कहिबा जे सेमाने विच्छिन्नतावादी भाव केतेक अछंती जोटा कि बाह्य प्रभाव द्वारा सेमानक कम्युनिटी ध्वंस विध्वस्त हो जाइछि सेमानक उपरे आक्रमण करा जाउछि सेमानकर संस्कृति को नष्ट कर दिया जाउछि तुण से माने अन्य उपाय न पाई सशस्त्र विद्रोह करिबा पाई प्रयास जारी रखिछन्ति. It is also suggested that because of a failure of the often usual instrument of a foreign policy, the state have resorted the welfare through other means, that is support of a ethnic group against the state against the substantial groups. In a number of cases, since the ethnic group may straddle border foreign invention but build into the problem from the start, वैदेशिक आक्रमण द्वारा सीमा विवाद द्वारा अन्य बाह्य कारण माध्यम द्वारा सेमानकर सभ्यता नष्ट हेउछि बोली सेमाने जहा अनुभव करिसंती एवं सेमान लाइफ सपोर्ट पाई सेमाने मध्य प्रयास जारी रखिसंती. apart from expertise, support may also be provided by other ethnic groups for ideological reasons. such as support to liberation movement. Whatever may be the reason for such support, it is quite clear that external factor can be only provide sustenance and or the moral boast of the ethnicity. It cannot be it cannot be in itself the main cause for the origin and the existence. The main cause is for its origin and its existence. आमे दुईटी मुख्य उपादान देलु गोटे है आभ्यंतरण कारण आ गोटे है बाह्य कारण। आभ्यंतरण कारण दृष्टि से माने बहु भाव सफरिंग होइचंती ओ अन्यान्य समाज लोक मान द्वारा अवहेलित और निर्यातन पाउथिबा बेले से माने विद्रोह करने को बाध्य होइचंती। आउ बाह्य कारण दृष्टि अर्थनैतिक चाप, विदेशी मानकर आक्रमण, उपनिवेशवादी मान द्वारा से जंगल जमी को नष्ट कर दिया जिबा बा सीमा आक्रमण द्वारा से जीवन उपर प्रभाव पड़िथिबारु से माने विद्रोह करिया पई बाध्य होइछंती। The summary of this topic is we have seen that most countries in the world are populated by the several distinct ethnic groups and the number of them the experienced or are experiencing ethnic movement of one or the other type. The problem involved in managing group conflicts in multi-ethnic societies are multifarious and extending complex. The group of ethnic self-assertion is in the many ways of consequences of these managerial problems and related developments. In many societies, ethnicity has become the main base for interest demand also. Among the possible causes generating ethnic movements are fear of loss of identity, economic grievances, political grievances, political mobilization by the elites. The most general complaint of this one community is denied its fair share of economic and political power. The demand and goals of the ethnic movement range from the redressal of grievances by the state to those who complete autonomy of separation. Similarly, ethnic movements can have various shapes ranging from the peaceful constitutional protest of civil war with ethnic of communal writing of the territorialism in between of them. शेषରେ ଆମେ ଜାଣିବାକୁ ପାଇଲୁ कि ସେମାନଙ୍କ ଧନ ଜୀବନ ସେମାନଙ୍କର ଜୀବନ ସୁରକ୍ଷା ପାଇଁ ବାଧ୍ୟ ହୋଇ ସେମାନେ ଆନ୍ଦୋଳନ ପନ୍ଥାକୁ ଓହରିଛନ୍ତି। ସହରୀ ସଭ୍ୟତା ଠାରୁ ଦୂରରେ ଥିବା ସହରୀ ମାନଙ୍କର କଳା କୌଶଳ କାଇଦା ବା କପଟତାରୁ ସେମାନେ ନିଜକୁ ବଞ୍ଚାଇବା ପାଇଁ ଗୋଟିଏ ମାତ୍ର ମାଧ୍ୟମ ଯୋଉଟା କି ସେମାନେ ବିଦ୍ରୋହ ଭାବିଛନ୍ତି। ତାହେଲେ ସେତିକି ନୁହେଁ, କାହିଁକି ନା ସେମାନେ जो आईन कानून से बहुत दूर थिबारु आईन कानून उपरे सेमानकर भरोसा नथिबारु तो सेमाने विद्रोह पंथा को एक उत्तम माध्यम बोली सेमाने मानिसंती। केवल भारतर नुहे पृथ्वीर अधिकांश देश रे एई भली अवस्था आमे देखिबाकू पाई सारिछि। नेक्स्ट सब्जेक्ट पॉलिटिकल रिजिम एथनिक मानकर राजनैतिक शासन पद्धति विषय में देखा ସେମାନେ କିପରି ରାଜନୈତିକ ସିଷ୍ଟମ ମଧ୍ୟକୁ ପ୍ରବେଶ କରିଲେ। ଯେଉଁ ଆଦିବାସୀ ମାନେ ଜଙ୍ଗଲ ରହୁଥିଲେ, ସଭ୍ୟତାଠୁ ବହୁତ ଦୂରରେ ରହୁଥିଲେ, how to they enter in the politics in the part of the politics. The chapter name is political regimes, ରାଜନୈତିକ ଶାସନ ପଦ୍ଧତି among the ethnic groups. We live in the world of nation states. There are about 200 nation states in the world today. Every state has a separate geographical boundary in which people live in under their own political regime. The term regime is different from the term system. While system implies major concepts, functions and structures, the term regime stands for the specific institutional arguments, how relationships are arranged, patterned and organized in a given society. The term political regime denotes the particular political institutional arrangements, how political relationships are structured and organized in a given society. A renowned scholar of political according to the Ray Meredith, he said, a political regime embodies the set of rules, procedures, and understanding that formulate the variety of political institutions. The legislature, the political party or party bureaucracy, to maintain a few that men perform the allotted tasks of roles involved in the governance. People live in different types of political regimes in which various political institutions play a great variety of roles and perform different. Although the institutions may carry the same name label, the legislature or political parties or bureaucracies play different roles of the pattern differently in different regions. Also, each political regime is the factor which conditions the political behavior and the attitude of those who govern and those who are governed. Those who govern and those who are governed. Regimes may also vary in their stability and legitimacy, degree of institutionalization, status of their development, and the kind of roles that determine the relation between the governed and the government. The relationship between the governors and the governed. The differ in the organization of political power, the form of political participation, the organization and articulation of interest, and the configuration of political rights. The characteristics of the political regimes. What are the characteristics of a political regimes? According to the Mardis, he gives some characteristics among the political regimes. First one is generate commonly shared goals and to do so, it must provide for the socialization for a common acceptance of the goal and the institution through which these goals are to be realized. That is the prevailing ideology. Prevailing ideology. Number two, provide the mechanism for decision making. Number three, establish mechanisms for articulation of interest and the aggregation of interest that define politics. Number four, provide for the ways and the means whereby decision makes and selected together with the roles of their successions. Next, maintain maintain order by the providing for the effective controls against the destructive behavior. Six, by capable of self-providing. All the political regimes try to perform these institutions at different degrees through the institutions by the constitute, and they are the assured them into their ability of them. ମର୍ସିଡିସଙ୍କ ମତରେ ଯେ ଏଥନିକ୍ ଗ୍ରୁପ ମାନେ କିପରି ରାଜନୈତିକ ସିଷ୍ଟମ ମଧ୍ୟକୁ ପ୍ରବେଶ କରିଲେ ସେ ତାର କେତୋଟି ଯେଉଁ ଲକ୍ଷଣ ବା ବୈଶିଷ୍ଟ୍ୟ ବିଷୟରେ କହିଛନ୍ତି। ସର୍ବପ୍ରଥମେ ସେ କହିଛନ୍ତି ଯେହେତୁ ସେମାନେ ଆଜ ଏ ସୋସିଆଲ ପିପଲ ବା ସୋସିଆଲାଇଜେସନ ଦେ ଏଣ୍ଟର ଦ ସୋସାଇଟି ଦେ must bound to accept participate the political system। ସେମାନେ ତ ଆଉ ଜଙ୍ଗଲରେ ନାହାନ୍ତି, ସମାଜରେ ରହୁଛନ୍ତି। ସମାଜରେ ରହୁଥିବାରୁ ଆଜ ଏ ସିଟିଜେନ୍ ନାଗରିକ ହିସାବରେ ରାଜନୀତିରେ ଅଂଶଗ୍ରହଣ କରିବା, ରାଜନୀତିରେ ଭାଗିଦାର ହେବାକୁ ସେମାନେ ବାଧ୍ୟ ହେଉଛନ୍ତି। ନମ୍ବର ଟୁ, ରାଜନୈତିକ ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥାରେ ଯେଉଁ ଡିସିସନ ମେକିଂ ନିଷ୍ପତ୍ତି ଗ୍ରହଣ କରାଯାଉଛି ସେଥିରେ ମଧ୍ୟ ସେମାନେ ଏତେ ଅଂଶୀଦାର ହେଉଛନ୍ତି। ନମ୍ବର ଥ୍ରୀ, ଇଣ୍ଟରେଷ୍ଟ ଅଫ୍ ଦ ଡିଟରମାଇନ୍ ପଲିସି। ସେମାନଙ୍କର ସ୍ୱାର୍ଥ ସୁରକ୍ଷା ପାଇଁ, ଆଦିବାସୀ ମାନଙ୍କର ସ୍ୱାର୍ଥକୁ ସୁରକ୍ଷା ପାଇଁ ସେମାନେ ରାଜନୀତିରେ ଅଂଶଗ୍ରହଣ କରିବା ରାଜନୀତି କରୁଛନ୍ତି। ନମ୍ବର ଫାଇଭ, ଦ ଇଫେକ୍ଟିଭ କଣ୍ଟ୍ରୋଲ୍ସ ଏଗେନ୍ଷ୍ଟ ଦ ଡିଷ୍ଟ୍ରବଟିଭ ବିହେଭିଅର। ଧୀରେ ଧୀରେ ସେମାନେ ସହରୀ ମୁଖା ହୋଇଥିବାରୁ ବା ସହରୀ ଜୀବନ ବିତେଇବାକୁ ସେମାନେ ତାର ରାସ୍ତା ଖୋଜୁଛନ୍ତି ଏବଂ ନିଜର ବିହେଭିଅର, ନିଜର ଲାଙ୍ଗୁଏଜ ତାହା ବଦଳିବାରେ ଲାଗିଛି। ନେକ୍ସଟ, ବି କେପାବୁଲ ଅଫ ସେଲ୍ଫ ପ୍ରିଜର୍ଭେସନ। ଦିନ ଥିଲା ସେମାନେ ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କୁ ଦେଖିଲେ ଡରୁଥିଲେ, ଏବେ ସମୟ ଆସିଛି ସେ ନିଜେ ନିଜକୁ ସୁରକ୍ଷା ଦେବା, ନିଜେ ନିଜକୁ ସମାଜରେ ପ୍ରଚଳିତ କରିବାରେ, ସମାଜ ଚଳିବାରେ ନିଜକୁ ଖାପ ଖୁଆଇବା ସେମାନେ ଆଦବ କାଇଦା ସବୁ ଶିଖି ଯାଇଛନ୍ତି। ଏଇଟା ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ହେଉଛି ତାଙ୍କ ପାଇଁ ଏକ ଲକ୍ଷଣ। ତ ଏହି କାରଣରୁ ସେମାନେ ପଲିଟିକାଲ ସିଷ୍ଟମ ମଧ୍ୟକୁ ପଶିଛନ୍ତି। ତ ସେମାନେ ପଲିଟିକାଲ ସିଷ୍ଟମ ଭିତରେ ପଶିବା ଦ୍ୱାରା କ'ଣ କାର୍ଯ୍ୟ କରୁଛନ୍ତି? ହ୍ୱାଟ ଇଜ ଦ ଫଙ୍କସନ ଅଫ ପଲିଟିକାଲ ରିଜିମ୍? ଏଇ ଯେଉଁ ରାଜନୈତିକ ପ୍ରଣାଳୀ କ'ଣ ସବୁ କାର୍ଯ୍ୟ କରୁଛି ହେଲା? ଦ ଫଙ୍କସନିଂ ଅଫ ଦ ପଲିଟିକାଲ ରିଜିମ୍ is characterized by the four major increasing process is by the performed by the different institutions. First one is the organization of a command. The organization of a command in sense the state and the agencies which often refer to the government. Number two, organization of a consent. Number three, the configuration of interest. Number four, the organization of rights. तो यही जो चारोटी पॉइंट माध्यमरे ସେମାନଙ୍କ ରାଜନୈତିକ କାର୍ଯ୍ୟାବଳୀ ଅନ୍ତର୍ଭୁକ୍ତ ହୋଇଛି। Now, କେଉଁ ପ୍ରକାର ଶାସନ ପ୍ରଣାଳୀ ପ୍ରଚଳିତ ହେଉଛି? Types of political regime. Types of political regime. Political regimes in modern times can be classified as a democratic regime and a totalitarian regime and a authoritarian regime. There are three types of political regime: democratic, totalitarian, and authoritarian. First, democratic. In a democracy process, individuals are assumed to be a free, clearly defined that determined the limitations and responsibilities as we took the features of a concern to the essence of the democratic regime. ଗଣତାନ୍ତ୍ରିକ ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥାରେ ସମସ୍ତ ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କୁ ଶାସନକୁ ଅଂଶଗ୍ରହଣ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ଏ ସୁବିଧା ବା ପ୍ଲାଟଫର୍ମ ଦେଇଛି। ଏଠି କୌଣସି ଭେଦଭାବ ନାହିଁ। There is no discrimination between a higher class to a lower class or a president to rickshaw. All are equal. There is no discrimination between among them. ଗଣତାନ୍ତ୍ରିକ ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥାରେ ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ ସମସ୍ତ ପ୍ରକାର ସୁବିଧା ପ୍ରଦାନ କରାଯାଇଅଛି। ତେଣୁ ଡେମୋକ୍ରାସି ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥାରେ ଜାତିଗତ ହିସାବରେ ମଧ୍ୟ ରାଜନୀତିରେ ସିଟ୍ ପ୍ରଦାନ କରାଯାଇଛି। ଯେମିତି ଭାରତରେ ହରିଜନ, ଆଦିବାସୀ ବା ଟ୍ରାଇବାଲ ସିଡିଲ୍ ଟ୍ରାଇବ ଏଣ୍ଡ ସିଡିଲ୍ କାଷ୍ଟ ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କ ପାଇଁ ସ୍ଥାନ ସଂରକ୍ଷଣ ରଖାଯାଇଛି। ସେମାନେ ରାଜନୈତିକ ଭାବେ ଅଂଶୀଦାର ହୋଇପାରିବେ। ହେଲା। ନମ୍ବର 2 ହେଲା totalitarian regime. Totalitarian regimes. The essence of a totalitarian regime lies in the ideology. Ideology offers a set of a comprehensive proposition about the problem of society. ତେଣୁ ଟୋଟାଲିଟାରିଜମ କ୍ଷେତ୍ରରେ ଆଦର୍ଶବାଦକୁ ଅଧିକ ଗୁରୁତ୍ୱ ଦିଆଯାଇଥାଏ। ଆଦର୍ଶକୁ ନେଇ ଶାସନ କରାଯାଇଥାଏ। General public is tightly organized in the name of the ideology with the goal of discriminating it and imposing. All the totalitarian regimes are based on the single party system. The nationalism regime can be classified into the communist totalitarian regimes like the Soviet Union and other Eastern European countries and the Balkan areas, Cuba, Vietnam, Mongolia, Ethiopia, Angola, Mozambique, Nigeria. That countries have ruled by the totalitarian regimes. ये जो केतोटे देश कथा मु कहिली विशेष करी क्यूबा, वियतनाम, मंगोलिया, इथियोपिया, अंगोला, मोजाम्बिक, निकारागुआ ये सब देश गुड़िकरे विशेष करी जो एकछत्रवादी शासन देखा मिलता है। Totalitarianism as an authoritarian regime share many common characteristics in both authoritarian and totalitarian regimes. Political power to concentrated and the command structure is not subject to the limitation of roles of responsibility that we find in the democratic regimes. The political leadership multiplies of the control of consist very light and control interest and interest associations utilizations of force to ensure the control of public media. Last, authoritarian regime. प्रभुत्ववादी authoritarian regime বা প্রভুত্ববাদী শাসন প্রণালী। In the world, there are based on the authoritarian. They can be classified as the personal regime, like Saudi Arabia. There is a single party regime or the outright personal tyranny, state of the bureaucratic and military regime. Before going into the name of the authoritarian regimes, let us Let us try to find out one of the causes of why society gets the transformed from the authoritarian regime. Firstly, authoritarian can be related to the nature of a formation of the nation state. Sometimes centralized control of a suppressive mechanism tends to the evolve with a view to deal with the dissidents, ethnic, regional, ethnic, tribal, and religious group in some states, especially when they are the ensure of a weak and rules of the day show the tendency. ପ୍ରଭୁତ୍ୱବାଦ ଶାସନ ପ୍ରଣାଳୀରେ ପ୍ରଭୁତ୍ୱବାଦ ଶାସନ ପ୍ରଣାଳୀରେ ପ୍ରିମିଟିଭ ଗ୍ରୁପ ବା ଏଥନିକ ଗ୍ରୁପ ମାନଙ୍କର କୌଣସି ପ୍ରକାର ରାଇଟ୍ସ ଦେଖିବାକୁ ମିଳିନଥାଏ। ଏଥିରେ ସରକାର ବା ଶାସକ ବରଂ ସେମାନଙ୍କଠୁ ଅଧିକ ଜୁଲମ କରି ସେମାନଙ୍କଠୁ ଆର୍ଥିକ ଶୋଷଣ କରିଥାନ୍ତି। The features of authoritarian regimes, first one is the military is highly significant and intellectual in such state. तो से राष्ट्र बेले बेले मध्य सेनापति शासन करिथांती, सैनिक सेनापति शासन करिथांती। एबे तो शासन अनेक तरह पाकिस्तान देखिबाकू मिली। Second, the level of popular participation is very low. बहु संख्यार लोक माने बा कम संख्यार लोक माने भाग करती और बहु संख्यार लोक माने भाग नियंती नाही। Rights, especially political rights, either non-existence of a nominal. Number 4, this is normally absence of why ideology is able as mobilize the masses. There are normally absence of any ideology to mobilize the masses. Number 5, while trying to subordinate societal and interest groups, authoritarian regimes do not have undertake the restorative of the society. यही सबू कारण जोगु ही बा वैशिष्ट्य जोगी प्रभुत्ववादी बा अथॉरिटेरियन शासन प्रचलित होता है। विशेषकर से माने मिलिटारी शासक भली शासन करिथांती, एकछत्रवादी शासन करिथांती, प्रभुत्ववादी शासन देखिबाकू मिलिथाय। तेणु ट्राइबल पीपुल माने धीरे धीरे ए पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम मध्ये प्रवेश करी एथिरे मध्ये अंशीदार हबाकू चेष्टा करिता। The last chapter is the military in politics. Military in politics. कहले कि शासन क्षेत्र रे मिलिटारी जो सेनापति अछंती सेमाने राष्ट्रपति बा सरकार करी शासन निज हाथ को नहीं था। थोड़ी अनेक देश रे देखि मिले थाए। तो अति पाकिस्तान जदि फॉर्म ऑफ गवर्नमेंट सेठी मिलिटारी मानकर दबदबा अधिक रही। तेणु देख बर्तमान नवाब शरीफ शहबाज शरीफ अच्छी प्राइम मिनिस्टर, आसिफ मुनी अच्छी सेनापति। तो प्राइम मिनिस्टर को जी पावर नाही सेनापति डबल पावर अच्छी। युद्ध हम न हम सेनापति निष्पत्ति नेबे, त्रुटि हम न हम सेनापति निष्पत्ति नेबे। तो अमेरिका राष्ट्रपति बा अमेरिका को जड़े रिप्रेजेंटेटिव हिसाब से प्रधानमंत्री बा राष्ट्रपति न जाइकी सेनापति जाऊँ से विभिन्न जगह को सेनापति रिप्रेजेंट कर जना पड़ुची जे सेनापति बा आर्मी मानकर प्रायोरिटी अधिक अच्छी। आर्मी माने राजनैतिक शासन व्यवस्था को कंट्रोल करिथां। तेणु राजनीति रे सैन्य बाहिनी बा राजनीति रे सैनिक constitutions and other forms of the law and land many countries to provide for the rule of the armed forces. Most of the democracies and the clearly restrict their missions of the military to the provisions of national security as well as to order the secondary rules in the case of emergency only. A number of states in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, that are third world countries, for example, have adopted the legal structures which protect the democracy by the providing for the right of president, the police, and military officers to exercise extraordinary powers on the temporary basis for the suspension of civil liberties and for the armed forces to play in specific demanding the permanent interest of the nation, the relationship between civil society and military in the democratic society is determined on the basis of the political principles. First one is there should be a leadership of the civilian executive branch of government which is accountable to a popular majority. So frequent of regular elections, military is the object of control and supervision by the three organs of the government. ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ରଙ୍କର ତିନୋଟି ଅଙ୍ଗ ଅଛି ଲେଜିସ୍ଲେଟିଭ, ଏକ୍ସିକ୍ୟୁଟିଭ ଆଣ୍ଡ ଜୁଡିସିଆରୀ। ଏ ତିନୋଟି ଅଙ୍ଗଙ୍କ ଉପରେ ଅଧିକ ମାତ୍ରାରେ ମିଲିଟାରୀ ଆଇ ୱାଚ୍ କରିଥାଏ ହେଲା। The supervision by all the three organs of the government. Number 2, the appointments of the personnel of the armed forces of done or behalf of the civilian had to be state. Civilian leadership is superior to the military superior and the departments. The professions military head of the economy and any other of the field force of subordinate to civilizing departmental heads. The causes of military intervention. केवल कारणରୁ ଏଠି military ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥା ଦେଖାଯାଏ। The nature of the military. It reason for the military interventions in politics are not far to seek. Firstly, military inventions of active politics taken part of owing to the basic class dissatisfaction or permission of the military tends to enter the about civilian society. ଯେତେବେଳେ ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ର ମଧ୍ୟରେ କୌଣସି ଦ୍ୱନ୍ଦ୍ୱ ବିବାଦ ଦେଖାଯାଏ ସେତେବେଳେ ସରକାର ମିଲିଟାରୀ ମାନଙ୍କୁ ସୋସାଇଟି ମଧ୍ୟ ପ୍ରବେଶ କରିଥାନ୍ତି ଏବଂ ଶାନ୍ତି ଶୃଙ୍ଖଳା ବଜାଇବା ପାଇଁ ସେ କାର୍ଯ୍ୟକାରୀ ମିଲିଟାରୀ ମାନେ କରିଥାନ୍ତି। ନେଚର ଅଫ ଦ ସିଭିଲ ସୋସାଇଟି ଆଣ୍ଡ ମିଲିଟାରୀ। ସଭ୍ୟ ସମାଜରେ ମିଲିଟାରୀ ମାନଙ୍କର ଭୂମିକା ଅନେକ ଅଛି। ସଭ୍ୟ ସମାଜରେ ମଧ୍ୟ ଅନେକ ଅସଭ୍ୟ ସମାଜ ଅଛନ୍ତି। ତେଣୁ ଅସଭ୍ୟ ଲୋକ ଅଛନ୍ତି, ଯେଉଁମାନେ ଅସଭ୍ୟ ଲୋକ ଅଛନ୍ତି ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ ଆଇନ କାନୁନଙ୍କ ଭିତରେ ପ୍ରବେଶ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ଏହା ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥା କରିଥାଏ, ଦଣ୍ଡ ମଧ୍ୟ ଦେଇଥାଏ ହେଲା। ତ ମିଲିଟାରୀ ରୁଲର ଆବଶ୍ୟକତା ରହିଛି। ଯେତେବେଳେ ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ର ଅଶାନ୍ତ ହୋଇ ପଡେ, ଅରାଜକତା ଦେଖାଯାଇଥାଏ, ସେତେବେଳେ ମିଲିଟାରୀ ମାନେ କ୍ଷମତା ନିଜ ହାତକୁ ନେଇ ତାହା କାର୍ଯ୍ୟକାରୀ କରିଥାନ୍ତି। ଏଭଳି ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥା ଅନେକ ଦେଶରେ ଦେଖାଯାଇଥାଏ। ବିଶେଷ କରି ଆମେ ଯଦି ପାକିସ୍ତାନ କଥା କହିବା, ଆମ ପଡୋଶୀ ରାଜ୍ୟ ହିସାବରେ ସେଠି ପ୍ରଧାନମନ୍ତ୍ରୀ ହୁଅନ୍ତୁ ବା ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ରପତି ହୁଅନ୍ତୁ, ସେମାନେ ବହୁତ ଦୁର୍ବଳ ଥିଲାବେଳେ ମିଲିଟାରୀ ଶାସକ ସେନାପତି ଅସିଫ ମୁନାରୀ ବହୁତ ଶକ୍ତିଶାଳୀ ଅଟନ୍ତି ଏବଂ ପାକିସ୍ତାନ ଶାସନ କ୍ଷମତାକୁ ନିଜ ହସ୍ତମୁଠରେ ମଧ୍ୟ ରଖିଥାନ୍ତି କହିଲେ ଅତ୍ୟୁକ୍ତି ହେବ ନାହିଁ। ମିଲିଟାରୀ ଶାସନ ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥା ଯୋଉଟା କି ଅତ୍ୟନ୍ତ ଭଲ ଅଛି ଆଉ ବହୁତ ଖରାପ ଅଛି। So history of the military intervention in politics case studies. First, USA. In 782, just after the regulation war, 975 to 781, certain officers who felt that they have received the subsequent part of any wartime service contempt the military rewards. ଆମେରିକା ଭଳି ଦେଶ ମାନଙ୍କର ମଧ୍ୟ ଏହା ଦେଖିବାକୁ ମିଲିଟାରିଜମ ଦେଖିବାକୁ ମିଳିଥିଲା। ଅଦର କଣ୍ଟ୍ରି ମଧ୍ୟ ଯଦି ଆମେ ଯିବା, ଇଣ୍ଡୋନେସିଆ କଥା କହିବା, ଇଣ୍ଡୋନେସିଆରେ ମଧ୍ୟ 1965 ରେ ମିଲିଟାରୀ ଶାସନ ଚାଲିଥିଲା। 1958 ରେ ମଧ୍ୟ इंडोनेशिया रे मिलिटारी शासन देखा मिलता। तेणु जो कंट्री गुड़िक अच्छा जो राजनीतिक प्रक्रिया दुर्बल थाए से मिलिटारी शासन मत देखा मिलता है। लेबानन, साउथ कोरिया, अफगानिस्तान, थाईलैंड, Pakistan, finally Pakistan, they are Bangladesh also. They are these countries are controlled by the armies. You have seen that the political situation or tragedy of a political situation in Bangladesh and Pakistan, how they are facing the civil wars in this country. बांग्लादेश 1971 जन्म होता राजनैतिक अस्थिर सृष्टि हो सेनापति माने निजर भूमिका अधिक गुरुत्व देउछन। द कंक्लूजन ऑफ द टॉपिक मिलिटरी रोल्स। The participation of military in politics is not seen the positive phenomenon. It is usually restricted a national security and for a secondary role of the nations in case of an emergency. A number of countries experienced the tendency during the 1960 to 1970 of direct military inventions, especially the Latin American countries. As in Southeast Asia, there are so many countries are affected with the military roles by the campaign of a military process. Especially in the Pakistan as a country, it is completely ruled by the military process and interfered by the military in Pakistan administrations. Thank you everybody. Today the class is over. I am completed the so many chapters. Unity 16. This chapter was comprised in ethnicity, politics, and the states. And chapter 17, politics of the community in identities. Chapter 18, ethnic movement. Chapter 19, political regions. Chapter 21, military in politics. The chapter 21 is left. We will discuss tomorrow. This chapter is the bureaucracy. Bureaucracy means Amalatantra ba intelligent persons of their entry and their work in the administration. They are bureaucracy. We will discuss tomorrow. Okay. Today class is over. Have you any question? Please maybe ask me. Have you any doubt, any question, anyone? Please ask me. Today's class is over. Hello.
No sir, kichi doubt nahi.
I hope today you are not clearly or listen my voice. There is some cloudy. Today is a cloudy day. वर्षा होतबारु आपण माने मो कथा किसी सुनि पन्नाती बोधे भाबुची ना सुनि पाचंती।
सुबह से सर क्लियर सुबुची।
निश्चित रूप से वर्षा हेले तो नेटवर्क के बबलिंग होबो। जाओ आज क्लास समाप्त हे जाई आ दीटा क्लास अछि हला हमर कोर्स कंप्लीट हे जिवो। जदि डाउट थाए तबे सामान्य नेक्स्ट क्लास में पचारि पाबे किछ असुविधा नै। आउ थरे इंदिरा गांधी नेशनल ओपन यूनिवर्सिटी समस्त धन्यवाद। मो तरफ मते समस्त धन्यवाद। जा पेशेंस सहित क्लास अटेंड करछो सुनछो समस्त को अशेष धन्यवाद। थैंक यू एवरीवन।
Thank you sir.
Today's class is
Thank you sir.
दूसरा को लूट